As a man navigates the transition into his seventh or eighth decade, the architecture of his daily life often undergoes a profound renovation, frequently diverging from the rigid blueprint society expects. Many men find themselves dwelling within the quietude of a solo household, a situation that immediately triggers a specific societal narrative. The outside world looks in and projects a shadow of isolation. They assume a narrative of abandonment, a story of quiet desperation, or perhaps a lingering sense of social defeat. But what if that projection is fundamentally flawed? Consider Elias, a 72-year-old former craftsman who spent his career building for others. One morning, while enjoying a slow coffee on his porch, he caught the pitying glance of a neighbor passing by. Elias didn't offer defense. He didn't need to justify his contentment. He simply took a breath of the crisp morning air and retreated back into his sanctuary, anchored by a truth that most observers are too frantic to grasp. Residing alone in one's later years isn't an admission of loss. It is often an intentional embrace of clarity. It is the arrival of a hard-won equanimity after half a century of relentless noise. Before we delve deeper, ensure you are part of our community here at the Silver Compass, where we explore the dignified and unfiltered realities of aging with purpose. Today, we deconstruct the misconceptions surrounding the solo senior man and reveal 5 transformative realities that define this unique chapter of life. The primary revelation is that for many, this isn't a state of being lonely. It is a state of being selective. After decades spent navigating complex corporate hierarchies, family obligations, and the performative nature of social circles, a man eventually learns to distinguish between what nourishes his spirit and what merely drains his battery. In youth, we sprint toward crowds because silence feels like a mirror reflecting our insecurities. But in the vintage years, that same silence becomes a healing balm. Elias once remarked that his younger self viewed an empty house as a void to be filled. Now, he views it as a canvas. The constant hum of a television is no longer a necessary distraction. The digital tether of a buzzing phone is no longer a lifeline. The mind finally gains the internal latitude it needs to simply exist. Psychological insight suggests that men who consciously curate their solitude rather than drifting into it by accident report a significant spike in emotional equilibrium. They possess a sharper cognitive focus, a stabilized mood, and a profound indifference to the shifting sands of social status. The second reality is the gift of emotional sovereignty. Living solo effectively dismantles a perpetual negotiation that defines domestic life. This doesn't imply resentment toward companionship or a dismissal of previous partnerships. Rather, it signifies that many men have simply graduated from the need to constantly perform a role. Much of a man's early journey is spent under the weight of external metrics. He must be the steadfast provider, the stoic problem solver, the emotional anchor that never drifts. It is a marathon of expectations that can leave the soul depleted. In this later stage, peace becomes a far more valuable currency than external validation. Research indicates that this reduction in interpersonal friction directly correlates with improved cardiovascular health, superior sleep hygiene, and mental sharpness. Many men discover that they finally experience true rest not because of physical silence, but because the internal dialogue of meeting expectations has finally fallen silent. The third truth often catches families off guard. The solo man often adopts a higher standard of self-care than when he lived for others. There is a common anxiety that a man left to his own devices would descend into neglect, skipping nutrition, or ignoring his physical needs. However, the data often suggests a different trajectory. When a man owns his environment, his routines become intuitively aligned with his body's actual requirements. Meals are consumed when hunger speaks, not when a schedule dictates. Movement happens when the muscles feel ready, not when it fits into someone else's agenda. When Elias transitioned to living alone, he traded heavy, habitual meals for mindful, nutrient-dense cooking. He wasn't performing for a guest. He was fueling a vessel he finally respected. He walked the forest trails for 40 minutes every dawn, not because it was a chore, but because it was his liturgy. Autonomy frequently fosters a renewed sense of responsibility toward the self, creating a lifestyle of discipline rather than decay. Fourth, we must dismantle the myth that solo living equals a life devoid of affection. Love in the senior years doesn't vanish. It merely shifts its frequency. It becomes less about the high-voltage intensity of romantic pursuit and more about the steady, reliable glow of meaningful connection. These men often cultivate deep, satellite relationships, vibrant bonds with grandchildren, intellectual peers, or local community groups that offer engagement without the exhaustion of cohabitation. They might mentor a younger colleague or volunteer their specialized skills to a local cause. Society frequently confuses the absence of a live-in partner with a vacuum of intimacy, but connection does not require a shared roof to be profound. Finally, we arrive at the most vital realization. For many men, this is the most harmonious era they have ever known. As the ego thins, priorities undergo a radical simplification. Drama becomes an unwelcome intruder. Conflict feels like a waste of precious time. Living alone allows a man to act as the gatekeeper of his own tranquility. As Elias beautifully phrased it, I am finally living at the cadence of my own heartbeat. Statistics reveal that seniors who maintain agency over their daily micro-decisions experience lower cortisol levels and a much higher baseline of life satisfaction. Of course, we must remain grounded in reality. Solitude is a double-edged sword. For some, it is a forced exile caused by bereavement or distance, leading to genuine isolation. The warning signs, such as a pervasive apathy, a decline in hygiene, or a total social retreat, require immediate attention. But for the vast majority, this path isn't a retreat from life. It is a sophisticated way of engaging with it. Aging strips away the illusions of what we should want, leaving behind the truth of what we actually need. Happiness doesn't always require a crowded room or a permanent witness. Sometimes it is found in the steam rising from a morning cup, the rhythm of a solitary walk, and profound liberty of being oneself, without needing to explain why. This isn't a tragedy of aging. It is a masterclass in self-respect and the ultimate reward for a lifetime of service. Thank you for joining us at the Silver Compass, where we value the strength found in silence and the dignity of a life lived on one's own terms.